It's okay.
Really? You're not gonna eat pizza? There's vegetable pizza over there. There's healthy pizza. Yeah, healthy pizza. Although I hear the problem with the healthy pizza is the mushrooms.
That's just my game.
I don't know. It's just what I heard. All right. Thank you everybody for being here. It is 6:03 p.m. and this is a special meeting of the Mahomet-Seymour Board of Education. We'll call it to order on Wednesday, March 6th. This time I'd like to remind everyone, if you're a guest, to please sign in. Everyone, please silence your cell phones. And I'd like to remind visitors, in order to facilitate an effective meeting, we ask anyone who wishes to make comments to the board to read the visitor guidelines found on the table outside the door and complete the participation form and get those to Jennifer. Roll call, please.
Giles.
Here.
Raver.
Here.
Hendricks.
Here.
Castle.
Yes.
Larson. Yes. Park. Here. Go.
Here. Can we stand for the pledge, please? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Board members, you had an opportunity to review the agenda after it was sent out. Does anyone wish to propose any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So
We'll give that to Larson and the second to Mrs. Park. We've had a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the agenda? Those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment? The main purpose of tonight's meeting is to talk about strategic planning and community engagement. We have, with the completion of this building, which is mostly complete except for a few punch list items, that was the big piece out there on the last 5-year plan that we put together probably 7 years ago, I would guess. The groundwork for that plan was really done when Dr. Oates was here, and then suddenly he was unexpectedly leaving. We did have a big series of meetings. We had different community members here. We put together several parts to that. When Dr. Oates decided that he was going to go back to Marion, we kind of stalled on that just for several months. And then when Rick got here, we took that and worked on implementation. So that plan is pretty much exhausted at this point. It involved clearly some building and grounds things, but also some administrative and academic pieces to it. And really dealt with lots of different district objectives. So since Dr. Hall arrived on the scene, we had some discussion that, when we get done with Middletown Prairie, that's probably a piece we need to address again and come up with a fresh vision moving forward. So at this time, I will turn it over to our superintendent, and she's got some thoughts, and we'll work through a plan maybe.
Okay, thank you. I've put a plan of action and kind of a more specific agenda in front of you tonight. And really, the focus tonight is answering two main questions, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But the questions are the what of strategic planning and community engagement, meaning what does the board hope to get out of it? What are the desired outcomes when we're finished with it? What do you hope that we have? And then also the why, and answer the question about why do we want to engage in community engagement and strategic planning. So we'll get to that. We're going to do a little bit more of an activity with that, which might be a little bit unusual for a board meeting, but it simplifies the recording process of your answers and your thoughts. Also gets us out of our seats. We know that movement is good for thinking and learning, so we'll do that in a few minutes. So what I want to start off with, though, is a very, very quick review of some information that I shared at the February 11th board meeting about community engagement and strategic planning. And I've also shared with all of you some articles and documents from the Illinois Association of School Boards about community engagement. And so those are there to serve as resources and background information, and they are all documents that are publicly available on the Illinois Association of School Boards website. So if any of our visitors or public want to read those are out there. Community engagement is one of the 6 principles of governance, so there's a lot of information, a wealth of information out there about that. So again, just to kind of go through, I'm reviewing information, so I'm going to go pretty quickly and not go through and maybe as in depth as we did at our February board meeting. But some of the groundwork that we already have in place, our board goals. We now have a demographic study and enrollment projection study that was completed in the fall of 2018 and presented to both the village board and the school board in a joint meeting at the end of January. And also the evidence-based funding model provides a roadmap for us going into the future. We seem to have some very positive information right now out of Springfield in terms of funding. Of course, there's a long, long road before a budget is approved, but early evidence suggests that our new governor is very supportive of funding the evidence-based model. So that's good. And paying for it's another question, but early indications are that this is a model that will continue to be funded. I also wanted to share Board Policy 810. I'm not going to read that specifically, but we do have board policy that specifically focuses on community engagement and talks about the process and really kind of provides an outline for what we're doing over the next couple of months. So it's already board policy in place for that. Just a quick review of the 4 board goals. Whoops, sorry about that. These are goals that we have worked on as it relates to my evaluation as superintendent, but they're also guiding principles or, again, a roadmap. Our school improvement plans in each of our buildings are linked to these 4 goals in the area of teaching and learning, facilities, finance, and culture. And so these, again, provide a roadmap or kind of a vision. We're hoping, though, through the Community Engagement Initiative to hear more from our community about these different areas. Oops, sorry about that. I'm the wrong way. So we also have some other current board policies that are guiding documents. They provide goals and objectives, philosophy about education in our school district. We're going to talk about those in a few minutes and review those just to get feedback from all of you to make sure that those policies reflect what we want them to reflect. These are locally written policies that have been in place for a while. I'll be honest, I'm not sure who originally drafted or created those, but it's a good time to take a look at those as it relates to strategic planning and community engagement. So as I mentioned, the board connecting with the community is one of the 6 foundational principles of effective governance that comes from the Illinois Association of School Boards. Really the main idea here is the school board engaging in 2-way conversation with the entire community. This conversation enables the board to hear and understand the community's educational aspirations and desires and to effectively serve as an advocate for district improvement and inform the community about the district's performance. So this is just change that. More information about connecting with the community, what that community engagement looks like, building trust and support, being in touch with concerns and values, finding ways to reach out to the community, who are the district's owners, to engage people in conversation, finding people who maybe don't typically engage with the schools, people who no longer have children and grandchildren in the schools, but again, hearing a diverse set of voices from our community. Community engagement, a little bit different than public relations. Public relations is still absolutely part of our communication plan and what we do, but that's more about just pushing information out and telling our story about what goes on in our district. Community engagement, though, is more about listening and connecting, actively involving diverse citizens in dialogue and discussion and deliberation. It's planned, sustained, and formalized, so that's the purpose of having this meeting, is to work on exactly what we want and what the board wants, the goals and the outcomes to be, and the reasons behind why we want to engage in this process. It's also important to note that it's the purpose of engaging the community and moving ahead with this initiative needs to be very clearly clarified and defined. It's not a democratic process. It's impossible to take every single suggestion that is given. There's going to be a wide range of feedback on information and the things that we do in the district. It's important to find the collective feeling of what's best for the district and move ahead with that. So also informing our community about how the information will be used. And what we've talked a little bit about, and we'll talk more about tonight, is using the community engagement process to inform a strategic plan or a vision over the next 5 years or so. Just a little bit of information then about the strategic plan, a vision for the future and a strategy how to get there, supported by goals and objectives and action plans. Putting these two things together makes sense. They seem to go hand in hand, hearing from our community and having that inform a vision and plan for the future. It's a two-way street. It helps the board, but also there's a lot of information that we can share with our community about the things that we do or what our current initiatives are or some of the laws and guidelines that we're required to follow. What is the current status of the district in terms of facilities and finance? And again, it's the opportunity to share in information and engage in two-way conversation. These are the next steps. So here we are in our special meeting on March 6th. We're here to clarify and define the purpose, answer the question, and be able to communicate the why of doing a community engagement initiative. I want to talk tonight a little bit about the process. I think tonight the most important thing to walk away from is answering the what and the why. We can continue to talk about process. I have some very broad ideas, and we'll talk about those later in the meeting. But certainly there's no plan in place, and hearing the feedback from the board is very important about how we proceed ahead. And we will talk about those board policies in a few minutes as well. So I'm going to come back to that slide actually. Leave that there. So again, next steps then, after reviewing all of that information, is to talk a little bit about the what and the why. And in order to do that, what I'd like to do again is for the ease of like visualizing the ideas and thoughts that the board has, but also then making the collecting of that information visible and then also somewhat easier to combine together. We're going to start with the what question and then move to the why question. And in front of you, you have Post-it notes and a marker. And again, this is the opportunity to move around, talk, discuss. And so what I want to start with is we're going to start with the what question. And so the what question is, what are the specific outcomes that the Board of Education wants to see as a result of engaging in a community engagement and strategic planning initiative? Specifically, what do you hope to learn from our community, and what do you want the outcomes to be as a result of engaging in that two-way conversation with our community? So Each of you, your assignment is using your Post-it notes. You have got big and small, so it facilitates any size handwriting that you might have. Each of you need to come up with 3 of the top reasons of what is the what of the community engagement. What do you hope to learn, or what would you like the outcomes to be of a community engagement initiative? And then you're going to take your Post-it note and put it on the big Post-it note that says what. All right? So think about those questions. No hurry. Heard some people discussing Jeopardy, so we could get the Jeopardy theme song going.
Music.
You need 3
I'm working really chocolate down. There's a song for everything.
I thought about 5.
Oh,
It's late.
You might have a revolt on your hands.
It's 3.
Now it's gonna go through my.
It doesn't have to be one word. It can be a sentence. It can be a phrase. One per sheet.
Oh,
You just put 3
One
up.
per sheet.
Post-it.
So you're each of you.
One thought per sheet.
One thought per sheet. Right?
Oh,
So each of
okay.
you are going to put up 3 Post-it notes. So that whole sheet, the whole big sheet's going to be covered with, in theory, 18 Post-it, right, or 21 Post-it notes.
So what do we want to learn and what do we want the outcome to be?
Correct. 3 things. 1 per Post-it note. Put 'em on.
Do I get extra credit since I went first?
There's no extra credit. Legibility though.
I actually just want you to know that I wrote some things down on my homework, so.
Oh,
So you're just an old.
you're a gunner.
Mhm.
Well, that's the teacher in me.
Did you read the big packet?
This packet, the big packet. Uh-huh.
I
And
can't
I wrote
tell
on it.
why, I can't tell why I read the executive summary.
It was the big
But
packet.
this is my business and that's what I wrote.
You wanted us to read the big.
Yeah, but my
Never
article is going down, I'm
surprised.
working on
Executive
early
summary,
childhood
just
and
say
they're
it.
named Mrs. Love and
Just wanted
Mrs.
to
Love.
give a variety.
Yeah, if I could post it, though, I'm not gonna stay up there.
Man, sure. What do you mean?
We're just doing the what right now, correct?
Just the what?
You got yours?
I got 2, I'm working on the 3rd one. I didn't realize it was a race.
No, it's not.
It's not.
Oh, by the way, we read.
The middle.
Maxi typewriter. We're not gonna be able to do that.
The good news is I got big post-it notes.
I'd starve on
You only starve on the veggie pizza if you pick on mushrooms. Mushrooms are the big part of pizza.
it. There's a joke here that
No,
I.
I
Yeah,
know.
there was, yes. Superintendent who was
I can take my.
all excited about the veggie pizza.
That's so
May.
funny.
And he picked off her mushrooms because they were too large.
Accepted.
It's like,
That's hilarious.
come on, we should extend the school year to middle of June.
My comment was you never hear the sausage and pepperoni pizza.
You know what, our kids, neither one of them have ever been at school on their birthday, ever. Grace will be 15 this year.
I'm
Matt's-
okay,
Then I learned
everybody got their.
Then I learned that that can happen, so.
You got the what answer? Okay, just to quickly review,
You brought popcorn?
what would be an area, so what do we want the outcomes to be? What's an area we want to improve? Important issues for the board to be aware of and work on, have a clear vision for the board moving forward. Consider a balanced calendar. What does the community like best about the district? What's the best way for the community to receive communication? What goal, whoops, doesn't mean it's not important. What goals should the board have for the next 5 to 10 years? Increase or facilitate board and community communication. Continue with educational excellence. Long-range plan discussed with the community about facilities. How do we get topics for dialogue? And can we find this out through engagement? What is the curriculum plan for buildings? School improvement ideas, varying interests of age groups, meaning the age groups of our community. Different. Okay. Identify community organizations, board vision, community vision, and an alignment of that vision. Specific plan for the next, it kind of is a lot. That's all right, all good. Specific plan for next several years that coordinates our resources, time, a process that is inclusive and involves all our various stakeholders, ensure all voices are heard. Alignment of community, so a lot of alignment, vision, long-term planning, school improvement, continuing our educational excellence. I think I got them all. Okay, so next assignment, the why. Why does the board want to engage the community? Why start this community engagement?
Back up over here.
Okay.
It seems to me that the theme here is very much hearing from others to what we can then act on, which is different than us just simply spreading the word as to what the way the world we look at.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which might feed into why.
Other thoughts on the what?
There's a lot of us wanting information. I think then the question is, how do we get people to provide that to us? That's kind of what
Okay.
it does.
We'll get, you're exactly, yeah. No, this reflects very much wanting to hear and listen. So the process then will be the strategy of how do we get to the what?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have the 5 Essentials survey that will be coming back, and maybe I'm not in the right place, but like, what do we do with that would help us do this? Or is that like a question for later, you know?
I think that's a great question. The 5 Essentials survey is most likely to be a piece that informs the goal of culture and environment.
Okay.
But Also keeping in mind that the purpose behind the 5 essential survey, or the reason that it's taken is because it's centered around the factors that support student learning and achievement. Like, what are the factors in school climate and culture that are needed to best support that? So the survey is based upon research that says these are the things that support that. Do your schools have that?
Okay.
That's a really, admittedly, a very simplistic explanation of it. So it absolutely could inform this, and we've had a really, excellent return rate.
And we don't get those though till end of April, or?
We get the preliminary results April, and then it becomes publicly available, I think, early summer.
Okay.
Don't quote me exactly on the timelines.
And when you say, Lindsay, publicly available, that's gonna be on the school's website, or how are parents gonna know that the results are
Well,
available?
We will definitely push it out. I'm not sure how it's been pushed out here before, but we'll definitely get it out there. And it's also now, the 5 essential survey is now part of our accountability measure under ESSA. It's not so much the results of the survey though as the participation rate, but it's very much a bigger piece of what we do than it has been in the past. We absolutely want our community to see the results of that. So I'm not quite sure the best way to push it out, but we will do that. It's all electronic, so we'll be, sending the link out for people to look at. Okay, let's move to the why question. So same assignment, one idea or thought, or multiple sentences per post-it note, whatever works for you. Answering the question
Max will
of
have
why.
100-page.
Why do we think that any of the what?
No, why does the board want to engage the community or move ahead with the community engagement initiative? What's the purpose of it? The what is what you're hoping to get out of it. Why is purpose?
Okay, fine.
Good copy. Eyes on your paper.
I'm waiting for Lori.
You can go first, it's fine.
Give up your star, your gold star.
One conclusion is that all left-handers write more words than the right-handers. Just an observation.
Green video, or I would throw my little paper pot at you.
All right, Mom.
Oh, man. I'm putting mine ahead of yours though, so it looks like I was first.
No, there's
Hey,
Boy,
Oh,
get away from that.
and you're just touching it.
Oh, I just closed.
Touched it.
Bless his heart.
You want to say stuff and say bless his heart. It's all okay. I know, but you can.
Oh, yeah, he's only 3, right, the drawer, right?
That's the way it is.
You guys need to go have some pizza instead of popcorn.
Yeah, cause
Yeah,
agree with
we're not gonna do
So
that.
I've heard there's mushrooms on it, so.
Yeah, huge
They're
mushrooms,
little ones.
there's cheese.
like the world's largest mushrooms are on that pizza.
You could put a Smurf under it.
14 olives for every mushroom.
But if you like vegetable pizza,
That's pretty good.
Next time, that's all it'll be.
Yeah, I see that coming. We'll get you, it's gonna be all veggie next time.
And only Pepsi.
Gosh, don't do that.
Okay.
Lori and I get cranky when
Quick
it's only
review
got Pepsi.
of the why. And so, the reason for doing this is that I will take these and, I'm gonna find the common thoughts, common themes, and then come back with an overall statement that we'll review in our next board meeting on April, or not Monday night, but our study session on April 1st. So we'll come away with, and we can still work on that if it's not quite right, but my goal then is after this meeting, take this and get into kind of one overarching statement about what we want to do and why we're doing it. So under the why, increase community awareness, share future vision with the community, get valuable feedback, build trust, so people know the community feel heard, build relationships, a specific plan to achieve the vision, give direction to the board, allow voice to provide their thoughts to the board. Communities are stakeholders, get and obtain different perspectives, benchmarks for board to achieve goals, clear vision for the district, that is smaller. To make policies that reflect what's important to the community, maximize district effectiveness, engage community members to have a sense of ownership in our future. The board can be insular. Someone want,
That's just why we're doing it.
yeah, okay. Focused investment, help interpret the gray between the black and white. We have responsibility to be wise stewards of public resources. Needs will probably continue to outpace resources, so we need a focused and prioritized plan. And we need to be in touch with the vision of the entire community, not just the loudest voices or those most involved. Okay, excellent. Great ideas there. Lots of good whys. Any more thoughts on the whys?
One that was not on my post-it note, but I thought was particularly good, was talking about relationship and trust back and forth. I think that's really important too. And a good reason to go through. If there were no other good reasons to go through this process, which there are a lot, that alone would be a great reason to do the project.
So when you say trust back and forth, you're talking about the board and the public?
I'm assuming that's what that person, I don't know, it wasn't my post-it note, but I thought it was good.
Okay.
And sometimes trust is developed through understanding. So,
I think it's always good for the board to hear from others, rather than just among ourselves, on what they see is a vision, because it's something that they may tell us that we haven't even thought of.
Oh, I think that goes back, I think it was one of mine on the what is, how do we encourage and receive that communication? What's the best way for people to reach out?
I was struck by the visitor we had that talked about the demographics and who was here and how the town's gonna grow or not. And how segregated the audiences were and the public is not just the public. So I think that's why I'm thinking about the varying interests of the age groups, is that he made it very clear, your retirees
Bless you.
don't think like those who are young coming into town. We need to know what those groups are, how to get some sense out of this segregated thinking that happens and why people want to live here and why they think the school district matters
Very different priorities.
in that
Yes.
choice. That's right. So there's 5 to 10 different priorities, not just one, certainly. So I think that is even the greater challenge than just simply building relationships, because it's not one community,
Right?
it's far more.
And he used that exact term, he said it's not just one community, so yeah,
We've got to be sensitized to that when we engage. That's why I wanted to be sure we identify the community organizations that we need to engage with, so that we cover the more than the one community we think that is out there.
Are you talking about
The process?
Yeah.
Yes, I have some ideas to share about that. And the literature from the IASB and just some experiences I've had require that community engagement, you've got to be very focused and intentional of who you invite in, because you do want to hear from the diverse groups. And we have, in any school district community, in some places it's greater than others, but you've got a whole segment of the population that it's hard to believe in our community, but they're not here because of the schools. But they're still our owners and support us. But they might not have, as I said, children or grandchildren or relatives in the school. It's still a great place to live, but
So
that
Lindsay,
connection to the schools.
when you say we have to be intentional on who we invite in, are you, I guess, I'm a little concerned with that statement, in that it's almost like we're saying, we pick you, and we're not picking these people.
Yeah.
So that's not what you mean, right?
That is not what I mean. So we'll get to process in just a few minutes, because I want to talk through how we reach those people. So when I say intentional, that can look like a lot of different things. The point is that there's a focused goal to reach out to as many possible diverse constituents that we have. Because we know that we have people who are way more engaged with the school, and it's important to hear from them. And then we have people that might be hesitant to engage, or there are people that did not have a good experience with school and don't want to come back in. And how do we hear from those people? So my point is just that talking through those things and figuring out strategies to reach as many people as possible is got to be part of this.
Not to get too far ahead or steal anything that she might want to say down the road here, but I think, I think what we will end up doing is anyone that wants to participate is going to be welcome to participate. We're not going to exclude anybody, I don't think. On the other hand, there needs to be some people we need to make sure are invited and included. So she can talk more about that when we get there.
What I'd like to do before we go to process, though, is in front of you, you have 3 board policies. And I just want to take a look at those and make sure, not that one, no, here we go. The first one is 1:30, school district philosophy. You can see by its adoption date that, and that's not a reflection that it's good or bad, it just it's been in place just about 10 years. I don't know, a couple of you were on the board then, so I don't know what went into this. But just a good time to review it and make sure that it reflects what you all want it to reflect in the policy.
Well,
Well, for sure, the top one, we've talked about that in our dialogues this year, and a lot of communication with parents about safetyness, awareness, background checks, securely. I keep calling that software I Spy. I know that's not what it's called here, and I call it I Spy. You know, like protection for the kids.
That mission's incomplete because there's no qualifier as to the cost of having the highest level of student learning. So we want to do this at some effective tax rating. And we've been very good at that, but just to have the mission say we're gonna be the best and have the highest level is inadequate. So we ought to work on that.
That's very true.
We need to make sure that, because I notice in this school district, there's nothing about fiscal responsibility.
Mhm.
So that something
Okay,
in here needs to,
No fiscal approach at all.
yeah.
But we have.
Well, when these goals were written, we had
We
less
have
money
it.
than we do now, so it really-
Yeah, no, you
Yeah, I
do.
see.
I agree with you.
Add that in there, gotcha, okay.
there was really no money to worry about.
10 years ago.
so Merle, you're suggesting
Is it an open checkbook?
the mission
There was no
statement needs to be expanded a bit to include,
Some sort of fiscal responsibility in addition to, I mean, if our philosophy is multifaceted, I'm sure we would all agree, but this statement doesn't say that.
okay?
And I don't recall for certain, but most of these were adopted about the time we started the subscribing to the press. Prior to the press subscription, we had hodgepodge policy manuals in different buildings that were not effectively updated or kept in order. And when we went to press, we made a major effort to change all that. And I think these philosophies were put in place at that point.
Max and Merle, can I ask you, because you guys were on the board during this time, maybe? No? What was the intention of the word progressive? Because when I think of progressive,
No, I have no idea.
I don't recall.
Could I suggest that that be replaced with research-based?
I like that.
I'm very uncomfortable with the word progressive, because I think of,
But that can be interpreted in many different ways. Does that mean research from the community? Does it mean research academic?
That's what I
Does it
think of.
mean-
I think of academic just because that's where I,
Right, but it's,
evidence-based practice, is that what you said? Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's what we say at UVile, evidence-based or research-based.
Yeah, I don't,
evidence
we
is
value
given.
a positive evidence-based
EVP.
approach.
I mean, and that's what our teachers are required to do evidence-based practice, so.
The other part about the mission is it really seems to just encompass the intellectual growth of students. Is that what we're confining it to, or is there more to that process of developing our students and future community leaders rather than just an intellectual?
Yeah, make good
Academic.
citizens, make,
Oh, 'cause we have,
yeah,
we have social emotional learning standards now for kids.
right.
If you ever talk to Hensley, he's always so excited and proud of all the different groups that we have and student organizations for our diverse group of learning environment to be part
And
of.
it's like the leadership team that got started at the junior high.
Right.
Well, I mean, really our goal, part of our goal anyway, is to set up students to be effective for the next stage of their life.
whether that's intellectual, whether that's emotional, whether that's,
Yeah.
Social, intellectual.
So I think, I agree with Jeremy that I think there needs to be something in here besides intellectual.
And there's a lot that's missing.
And then, you know, to Merle's point, doing it all in a fiscally
Okay.
responsible manner.
Well, I think there's more either expected of us now than 10 years ago, or a higher burden on us in the sense that the expectations that include social and emotional don't always come with funding.
Well, I think you're right, I think it's
I
both,
mean,
there's
we-
more
we-
expectations now and there's more needed to be done.
We've got certainly more unfunded mandates today than we had 10 years ago, and we need to address all those things, but can we be all things to all people? Don't know, I mean,
That's hard to do.
yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that in the first part of there, with the mission, is include a piece about fiscal, the mission has to take place under the guise of maintaining fiscal responsibility, fiscal health. And then the development of our students is intellectual, but also social and emotional as well. And then replacing the term progressive with evidence-based practice or approach.
And the value, the physical responsibility piece, as far as I'm concerned, can go down to the
On
value
the value
statements. It doesn't have to be in the mission.
That actually makes sense.
But I think the mission needs to be expanded to include social, emotional, life skills, whatever you want.
I think it can be in the philosophy. I think it should be in the philosophy. In some fiscally responsible manner, we're gonna do X, Y, and Z.
Get your mind, this guy.
Yeah.
I seldom do it.
Because, and then we ought to, I go back to the board meeting when we had quite a few people in the room at Middletown 10 years ago. And everything we do, extracurricular, everything we do that's a new, take on something new. Look at what we've done with Macy and other things. Each of those should be evaluated against this. And it might be a good exercise to go through a few of the things that we've done to say, hey, do they meet, what did that do for us, and how do we put words to that to give a little bit more depth to what we want our philosophy to be.
So it's intentional.
Intentional, yes. Absolutely. But with clear examples to help us remember why we've done some things and give boundaries to where we draw the line to say, yeah, it doesn't fit.
I guess, when you guys came up with this school district philosophy, was that something that was taken out to the community to get input from them? Because I think it's something that we do need to get some input from the community as to what do you value for the school district? Because I think that will help us.
Totally agree, but I have no illusions that's what we did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
This is probably an evolution of a policy before it too, already, of,
There
a version
was,
of a modified policy.
the last time we did a big community engagement, bring all the stakeholders together kind of thing. This was discussed. Now, whether it was crafted or edited at that time, I can't remember.
So whatever the will of the board is, but could hold off on revising that until we hear back from the community.
That's kind of what I'm
Oh,
thinking.
sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's really up to the board to just decide what the school district philosophy is. It doesn't say school board philosophy, it says school district philosophy. So to me, I think it needs to go out to the district to get input from them.
Maybe that's one of the
I
things
think when we
do
get
want
these
everybody together.
feedback items, it's gonna make this
Can
a
inform.
lot easier.
We've been around longer than 2009. What was our mission then, before? We had to have had a mission statement maybe? Nothing?
Or not, no idea. I don't know. Some of that stuff was not very well archived.
And I don't know that it matters what happened in the
Well,
past.
right.
We're looking
It
forward.
just
We're
gives you
looking
an
towards
idea
the
of-
future.
Where'd this come from?
Make you feel better?
Historically.
If we had nothing, then this is better than nothing.
That is true.
I don't think any of us are saying this is bad, it's just that
Just outdated.
times have changed.
There's
Well,
things
and we
that
can't
are-
change what happened in the past, we can figure out where we wanna go,
Yeah.
head that way, so.
There needs,
Okay, so we'll put that one on hold and work on it once we hear more from our community. Excellent.
we can probably think that evidence-based change. will roll out.
All right, if you flip over the next policy, 310 goals and objectives. Oops, where is it? There we go.
tweak that a whole bunch if we wanted to, but I don't know that.
So, if 1.30 was philosophy and 3.10, what's the major section for 1 and what's the major section for 3? I don't even know.
1 refers to, the board, hang on,
I have my iPad.
school district organization, section 1, and then 3 is
Looks like a superintendent.
general school administration.
It's interesting that the philosophy was updated
After this.
almost a year after the goals and objectives.
And then what is section 6?
Curriculum and instruction.
So 3 is clearly administration is what you're saying.
Yeah. And then here's 6, instruction.
My guess is 610 was crafted by press.
610 probably is a plus.
What'd you say? Was crafted by what?
Yes,
For us.
so you see that 610 has an update
Yes.
last, and that did come from a press
Yes, okay.
update.
Yeah, we didn't create that language.
Just clarification,
reasons.
We approved that language, but we didn't create it.
will you make sure that the gallery knows what press is? Not the press is newspapers, it's a service.
Press, the service, yeah.
It's a service we use to update our policies.
So PRESS is an acronym for Policy Review Education Subscription Service. People are nodding at something.
Most,
But the
Most
vast
districts-
majority of our board policies come from this because there's so much legal action and statutes that inform board policy. But there's a few exceptions to that where they're more local, which would be like
well, 130.
130 and 310, but 610 is from press. I'm trying to get back to 310.
I'm sure policy 610 is lawyer approved. It's got the gold seal
Sorry, school law is
of
not
the
nice.
2018.
I'm
ISB
sure
legal
the school
staff.
law attorney sat around and said, gave their little say.
So any thoughts on 310?
I mean, I can't find anything on that one.
I mean, it looks good.
I think we can.
I thought they look
It
good.
doesn't look on it.
I think what we need to do is we go back and look at 130, and that may or may not impact 310 some
Okay.
when we do it.
So I agree with Jenny's comment earlier that we need to know, and we certainly haven't asked directly, what the public thinks our administration should be doing. This is a start, but has that changed as well in 10 years? Are we necessarily going to need to be broader than we have been in what we said under 130 about just doing student learning? If we need to have an administration that is broader. We've got evidence-based funding models that suggest we fund in areas that aren't only teaching, for instance. So how do we adopt an administration objective policy that fits with funding models and expectations that have clearly changed? So that too deserves a conversation with the community to either validate those expectations of us or find things that we are not yet aware of.
Where the plan is for that. And so
think maybe Merle said it earlier, but it does seem like public education has broadened. It's gone from just the academic learning, that there's a lot more social, emotional needs and expectations, and needs that are not necessarily being met elsewhere. And as Christine talked about 2 weeks ago, I think it was, you can't expect a child to learn when some of those social, emotional needs are so out of bounds, and so
The family doesn't look the same today as it may have 10 years ago.
so.
Or
you
the
know,
instructional piece, there's more technology, there's different chairs, there's different workstations, everybody learns differently.
Yeah,
Here's a simple example. My son's teaching in the inner city, okay? And, you know, when we all went to school, you had lunch every day. Well, you know, in the inner city, they started adding breakfasts because the kids weren't getting home.
We used to have
Now everybody has breakfast pretty much. I mean, it took us longer to do that than some of those high-need schools. Well, now, you know, they're discussing, do we need to serve a meal before the kids go home? Because in some of these families, there is no food at night, okay? Now, that's just one real simple example, but the whole scope of public education has just continued to change.
that's probably the best. The scope has gotten so much broader, and you know, we want to serve these kids' needs, not just academically, but in other ways. But then there is the reality of, and I think Merle said this as well, the limited resources. You know, how do we allocate the resources, and that goes back to some of that. What's important to the community?
Well, we sat in some pretty good presentations in Chicago at the annual meetings, and the last few years, maybe this year and last year, were pretty exemplary about how public education has changed. But the audience has changed, and it may be more stratified in the cities as to who then pays for private school and who's left to go to the public schools. But I don't think we see that as much here, but we don't have that data necessarily either for making decisions. But how do those behaviors and expectations really look to us? We need to find that out.
Okay. Okay, so to talk a little bit about process here. Let me be really clear that this is only a beginning, just talking points. So I'm putting this out here just as a stepping stone for discussion, and we can go a completely different direction. Some really good ideas have been shared here about hearing some things that you feel we need to hear back from the community about. For instance, what do they value? How do we inform a policy, a board policy about what we value if we don't hear that from the community? So this is only, again, this is just meant to spark discussion, and it's like the roughest draft possible, but I felt like I should put something out there so we at least have a jumping off point, and we can alter, change, whatever the board feels would best inform the what and the why of the process as we've talked about tonight. So just a thought, a possible format would be having a minimum of 4 community meetings with a focus on these topics for each meeting. The first meeting in the series would also include an overview of the what and the why and the process, so that there's clarity with that and the definition of what it is that we're doing and why we want to do it. The final meeting, whether that's the 5th meeting or 25th, I don't know that we should do that many meetings. Needs to be kind of a culmination, a summary, a wrap-up with the recommendations coming forth to the board from those previous meetings. So Jenny, this kind of goes back to how do we reach our constituents? How do we reach the people that, you know, we intentionally want to have come in? I think the idea is that the meetings are open to anybody that wants to attend. We welcome anybody, that's the goal here. And participate. It would be great if participants could attend all meetings, realizing though, sure, you know, there's things get in the way of doing that. There could be people that, you know, if we kind of do a format based around those 4 broad areas, there'll be people that have no interest in finance, but really want to hear and talk about facilities. So those kinds of things can come up. But I also think that in addition to the meetings just being open, that there's an intentional effort to reach out to people who maybe otherwise might not come or might not, like, they might be thinking, hey, that's not for me because it's about the schools, or so developing that list so that we're touching multiple demographic groups and those populations that, again, maybe aren't as engaged with the schools. Were you ready?
You want to discuss yet, or you want to finish? Or get this one?
Let's let her get through it.
Let her get through it.
So the only other part of it, I mean, this kind of gets down into the weeds a little bit, but just some ideas of formatting. And again, it does not have to be 4 meetings. I think it's going to be important to strike a balance of keeping people engaged, though, too. I mean, this can't go on indefinitely. There's got to be starting point, end point. I think a 2-hour time frame is I don't think you want to go much longer than that. I think that then an idea would be to start each of these meetings with an overview of the topic from whatever person is most suited to, or best suited to talk about that topic. You know, if it's finance, it would be Trent. Teaching and learning, Dr. Rummel. Facilities is probably a combination of people, mostly Trent. And the purpose of that is to provide our participants, or the people that have come in, with a baseline of information about here's where we're at right now, and then doing a SWOT analysis, so to speak. It doesn't have to be that exact format, but just identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That can be asked in any number of different ways. It doesn't have to be that format. But what would you, asking the community, what would you want to see here? What are we not doing that you'd like to see us doing? What needs to change? And then just some additional information there in terms of formatting it, finding a reporter at each table. And then again, the board receiving summarized recommendations at the end of the process. And then that feedback would inform the strategic plan. The other thing that Max and I were able to talk about last week at our IASB dinner was that the IASB does routinely help boards through the community engagement process. And so retaining the IASB to facilitate this process would be something I would ask the board to consider doing, just so that there's, it's an objective person who's coming in and running the meetings and can provide just some, you know, outside expertise, as well as the, I guess, unbiased overview of the process. So that's just
They've done it before.
Yeah,
Right, they
Can
do
you
that
go
all
back
the
a
time.
slide?
they've done it before.
Back up one slide, please. You skipped over that last line.
Oh, board members being observers and listeners, but not participants. Yeah. I didn't do that intentionally.
So how did we come up with those 4 topics?
Those are the 4 broad board goals that we have right now.
That
They pretty much cover everything we do.
I mean, when did we, been around forever, or
No,
did we choose those? recently.
Has what been around forever?
I would
Those
Four
suggest,
topics.
Okay.
because I love meetings, I would suggest right out of the gate, we add an intro session that doesn't deal with any of those 4 topics, but does some of the intro stuff that you had talked about.
Like the expectations of the beginning part of it?
Right.
Okay.
Where we outline what we're doing, where we're going, what the expectations are, but then also as a part of that, we go back and address district philosophy and just talk, and have that part of the discussion where we talk about some of the issues we came up with tonight, and get everybody kind of on the same initial page, and then launch into the topics.
That would be good, but I'm struck by those 4 things, each being rather inward-looking. Like, and none of the 4 describe very well what we want to have for plans for outreach.
Well, I think these
And
are
a very-
These are
Just say it's
topics,
starting
they're not, they're not details of what exactly is gonna be discussed, so I think you have to explain what exactly does that topic mean.
No, I get that,
Know how to
but
discuss
if we
that.
want to be intentional about continued engagement, and not just have 5 meetings every 5 years, we ought to make it a topic where we get feedback specifically,
Could that
and
be part of,
build a continuing plan.
that be part of culture?
I don't think it's part of culture and environment, I think that is inward looking, I think it's a stakeholder engagement or something,
saying maybe
something
add a
very
fifth.
different, add a 5th, I think, if we don't intentionally add what it is we want to do with the community, we may just miss it.
Well, isn't that the original, I mean, what Max is saying, which is the first meeting of what are the expectations and what is it we're trying to get out of these topics and the suggestions that are being made? Because I think if you don't provide the explanation and the goals, then all that information that's to be discussed is gonna go nowhere. It's like a,
But if we look at the 90 minutes, we're gonna do a SWOT analysis by each of the 4 topics, and if we have, maybe we need 5. If we don't get a SWOT on how we're doing with the community, again, I think we're gonna miss it. So I think we'd be very intentional and put that on a tabletop.
Maybe at your expectation meeting, you find out what the hot topics are. I hate to use the word hot topics, but the topics are. I
So
mean,
Merle, on
it's
the,
much better to engage people in what they want to hear about instead of what we think they need to know.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I'm not completely sure. Are you talking about how do we follow up down the road?
The process involves table discussions on each of those 4 broad categories. I don't think any one of the 4 actually covers the topic of continuing community engagement. So if we don't add that as a topic, to actually drill down through a SWOT analysis on that topic, I think we're gonna miss it.
So what you're saying is, we need to spend some time, kind of like some of the comments
Yes.
up here,
Yes.
how to communicate, how
Yes,
best
So
to.
I actually saw that as occurring under culture and environment,
it
maybe called something else
could,
though.
but that's kind of why I'm saying we may miss it.
Yep, absolutely.
Because culture and environment, we get wrapped up in staring at our navel and what we ought to be doing internally here, but, and not specifically thinking about the external.
To be clear, we're not staring at nails.
So in other words, I want to make sure we have processes and goals and objectives going forward that address that topic intentionally.
but I mean, like you said, all of those topics should all be internal and external. It can't just be internal. I mean, then what would be the point of going out to the community?
Exactly.
I mean, we might as well just talk amongst ourselves and then come up with, you know, the goals of the next 5 years. We want the external on every topic. It's not just the last topic that we want the external on.
I think
But I'm
we
struck
talked
by
about,
the fact that those 4 topics, the way they're written there, are we want input on how we're gonna teach inside these buildings, or how we're gonna have learning environments in our daylight hours, and the things that we do. So each of those 4 don't quite cover how we're also gonna engage very intentionally outside of these walls.
Well, I think, whatever, I agree with Merle that up there we identify communication a couple
Right.
dozen times. Whatever it looks like, I think we just have to be intentional that,
we need to make
whether
sure
it's
it
a
gets included.
5th topic or
Or whether
rolled
it's
into
under
another
culture.
one or whatever, that we go away.
Yeah, I'm not stuck on a fifth topic,
Right.
it's just that we somehow need to be intentional about addressing that.
That we go away from this with a really good
Because it's
understanding
not-
of how.
Naturally gonna fit in each of those four things.
I think we bring it up and address it as we go, and then when we get to culture and environment, that's where we really make extra effort to make sure we have a plan.
And I think while we have this plan, I mean, it's not something set in stone, because as you hear from the community, when we start this, it may completely move
Yeah.
based on what the community drives.
Well, we shifted parts of the last one.
So I think we've got to be open to the fact that, you know, the community may say, okay, these aren't the topics that are important to us, it's these.
Yeah. Good point.
True.
Mhm.
Well, is there a tool that we can come up with to assess that from the community initially before we start having a bunch of meetings that are ineffective and we end up changing direction and adding more meetings?
I think perhaps what we need to have with the community is, Lindsay, like what you're having with us, which is an open dialogue and brainstorming of these Post-its of what is important to the community, because then I think at that point we can drive exactly how are these meetings gonna get set up, what are the topics that are gonna get set up. So we need to have that initial meeting with the community to listen as to,
Well,
So
that could-
you're suggesting like a foundational meeting, just
Yeah,
to,
Yeah.
well, that, and we've talked about a foundation meeting,
Yeah.
that could be part of it. And then items that come up, either we make sure go under one of these categories, or if we need to shift the categories or create different categories, then we do that.
I see it as an initial sort of brainstorming with the community, and then the board circling back based on what the community has stated to say, here's the plan of the roadmap of meetings that will happen, rather than us saying, here are the roadmaps for the
yeah,
meetings.
I like that.
We're not driving it, the community needs to drive it.
Those 4 points up there, though, almost have to be in there. I don't see how we can do a strategic plan without covering those topics. Now, that doesn't mean we don't add additional ones to,
Right.
to Jenny's point. If they, if the community tells us, hey, you guys are, say A, B, C, and D are important, well, we think E and F are important too, then we have 6 meetings and stuff.
Well, correct. Or we figure out how to incorporate.
Yeah, that's,
So if I'm hearing you right, Jenny, the feedback we get could either be major or subtopics. With either way,
Yes.
we would set ourselves up for better
Yeah.
meetings.
So, I mean, the foundational
have that.
meeting is not a free-for-all, it's, we will guide it, but, so, it's gonna be everybody sitting there all talking at once, and sort of, here are the things, and then we listen to them, and then we can
Yeah.
circle back to say, okay, obviously, this is not as important as this to the community, so I think we've gotta listen to them, and it
Well,
can't be one meeting after another that we've already scheduled. It's gotta be, we have that initial meeting to hear from the community, circle back and figure out, okay, what is the majority of the community say are important topics, and then at that point we schedule those
So in
meetings.
the foundational meeting, which I kind of like the ring of that, we are soliciting input. We're talking about
For the
mission,
framework.
mission and
Yeah.
philosophy.
Yes.
Lindsay, I would expect AASB to have some ideas on how they've done that already. And that it is a good idea to have their leadership present.
Yeah.
When we do this.
yeah, that.
Especially because it's intentional for us and it's intentional on a regular basis for everybody.
Yeah.
And maybe even a survey before the foundational meeting might kind of do what you've done up here and kind of start seeing some themes that might lead us a little bit.
What I'd like to also see, Lindsay, is a timeline. And
I was
approach, because
right now.
the problem with this type of big picture, we do this all the time at my firm. We appoint committees and we talk and talk and talk, and nothing happens. I don't want that to happen, because we're investing, the community members are investing by providing their
Their feedback.
their
And if we
feedback,
don't
and then
engage
if
them
we
then,
take it,
they're out.
it falls on deaf ears, then We might as well not even have started.
We need,
Yeah.
and ISB may have some ideas on timetable. I'm thinking that once we have the initial meeting or the foundational meeting, as we're not calling it, I think we're looking at a process we wanna work through under 60 days probably, to have the rest
I
of
was
the
gonna
meetings.
say 2 to 3 months at the most.
Yeah, okay, so 60 to 90 days.
Like a meeting every couple of weeks.
Yeah. We're not-
To Merle's point, how are
That's
we
cooler
gonna,
calendar days.
how are we gonna identify those subgroups that need to be involved, especially at that initial
We could
foundational meeting too?
probably bring some.
well,
Because
think through
there's
that.
definitely some selection bias in how we choose people or
At a minimum, we need to check some boxes, make sure we get people that.
Last time, I think we had all the board members email the superintendent with ideas of segments of the community to make sure we reach out to, and then we kind of put all that together.
Representative of all the buildings.
Yeah, so we could do that way, or we could sit here and,
ISB might have
and
ideas.
do post-it notes again
Groups.
too, if we wanted to.
Regular ed, special ed.
But we let everybody kind of think about that. And between everybody on the board, we pretty much did a good job, I think, of being pretty inclusive.
I think to guard against one firm's actions of maybe inaction after you've done all the heavy work
You
up
realize if
front.
my partner's here, see this meeting, they're gonna be like,
Nobody's working.
like, what?
Trying to word that.
They don't need to know what's on that video, it'll be fine.
I think
Just
one of
threw them
the,
under the bus.
we didn't say it really explicitly here, but I think one of the outcomes that has to be here is what the post-5 meeting engagement plan looks like. I think we need to very intentionally have continuing engagement of some sort that we have identified. And maybe it's once a quarter, I mean, we don't have a comprehensive list. I mean, we've got some organizations covered like Rotary and some other things, but if we work at it, we can be far more intentional to this on how we're gonna do this going forward. So I think we've gotta have that plan as an outcome and not just chalk it up to a strategic plan. Just need an active engagement plan, because that's one of the things.
And I think that'll come out of the communication part, you know, how us to
Well, I think it will, but again, being intentional about it and expecting that to be one of the outcomes is
No, I get it.
those are two different things.
Foundational meeting. Is
Got
that a
enough
legal-
guidance?
Is that a legal term?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, thank you. Great, fantastic ideas, and I appreciate the input, and think there's solid direction here.
Do you have thoughts on timetable?
Well, a little bit. Let me get to that in a second.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I would like to set up a time to meet with a representative from IASB. And so an initial meeting of that could maybe just be 2 of you with Patrick Rice and myself. I assume it would be Patrick, because he's our like our regional field rep. So is that a logical next step?
What happened, yeah, and it probably will be Patrick. I think last time we used Dave Love. Is he still around or not? Did he retire? Remember
I
him?
don't know. I do remember him. I don't know. I can.
He just kind of disappeared. I don't know what
He
happened.
might have retired then.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of what we've talked about, Patrick would say, yeah, we've already got this figured out, you guys don't need to
Yeah.
reinvent the wheel. And so probably meeting with him first is probably the logical next
Okay.
step.
But I guess, Lindsay, are you thinking that's in the next couple of weeks, next month, next?
Probably depends when she get Patrick here.
I'd like to meet with him in the next month. I think one thing to discuss is, do you do this over the summertime? Is that gonna be really hit or miss on finding people? Cause if
There's
you,
pro and con.
yeah. Or do you know, I don't wanna lose any momentum that we have from this very evening tonight. I think it would be really difficult to fit this in like literally the next 60 days. The end of the school year is a really, really busy time, for all families. So I don't know that I don't know if we should set a date tonight. I agree with you wholeheartedly, Jenny, about setting a timeline and really actually kind of backward planning from the standpoint of saying that here's the date that we want to be finished with this, and then setting meetings up in between.
I'd like to start out the next school year with a plan in place.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, the thing is, everybody's busy in summer, but everybody's busy during the school year too.
Yeah,
If it's
I
not
agree.
vacations in the summer, it's games and practices and everything else in the school year, so.
Maybe if you have your foundational meeting first, you might get stakeholders that would commit to do the ABC mood
Yeah.
meeting to follow, you know, the informational time might spur some interest in that. You had that well laid out, and then you would know, you know, if you do this, we want the commitment because we want the continuity.
And not very many of us go on vacation for the whole summer.
Well,
I know. So, you know,
It's hard to do that.
people may miss a meeting because they're on vacation, but you know, but the point was just made, they may miss a meeting in April, May because of track or chorus or a work commitment
think
or
so.
who knows what. So, but I agree with Jenny,
Get it going?
we wanna get it going, we want it in place, I think, for next year if we can. We don't wanna be sitting here 12 months from now, just.
Yeah, I don't want to have this discussion again.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd be happy to work with you, Patrick.
Okay.
and I would volunteer to help.
You just got your two.
All right.
There we go.
Good deal. Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
As long as we got that cocoa bid.
Cheers.
All right, the only other thing, we don't have to answer this question tonight, but it helps to, I think, in a sense, brand this initiative. So thinking of a name for our process here, and again, it doesn't have to be answered tonight, so keep the creative juices flowing. So,
Lance Rager process.
two major next steps. I will reach out to the IASB, get a meeting set up that involves Merle and Lori and probably Patrick Rice. Again, he's the regional field rep, and he's done this a lot. If he's the guy, then he'll be good at it. And then I will summarize the what and the why, and bring back kind of a summarized statement that encompasses those ideas and share that in our study session on April 1st. Okay. Like next steps, and then actually on April 1st, I'll bring back a tentative timeline too.
Okay. You know, when we did this, however many years ago it was now, and I'm gonna guess it was 7 years ago. You know, they sent two people, it was Dave Love and somebody.
Oh, okay.
No. I don't know. It's important to have two people in finance, but that was the format at that point.
Figured out now.
I made a little acronym.
Do it.
I don't know if it's very good, but
It's good,
that's
it's good.
totally the way I roll. I have
Good,
RISE,
ladies.
we will restore our initiative by studying our environment. I don't know if that's good, but that's what I came up with.
That has potential, thank you.
I think that's a mouthful.
Put it on the list.
Anything else on strategic planning and community engagement?
That's all I got.
Just ask. All right. Hearing nothing, closed session is necessary for one, the employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of a civic employee of the public body, including hearing testimony and complaint lodged against the employee to determine its validity. Is there a motion to go into closed session for that reason? Sound excited, everybody? Is there a second?
Second, Larson.
All right. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Park,
Yes.
Cassim,
Yes.
Raver,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Larson. Yes, McCall.
Yes, we'll go into closed session to talk about this particular issue. We do not anticipate any business at the conclusion of closed session, is that correct? But we are on recess for
Did that make sense?
5 to 10 minutes.